we are observing the 61st anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising Day, and I would like to welcome our chief guest, Francis Kopriva, and special guest, Dana Barsarova. As you know, two of them are from the Czech Republic. Czech Republic has a distinction of being not just the biggest supporter of Tibet and Tibetan people, but also former president, late President Václav Havel, had a very special bond, relationship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and great support for Tibetan people. Then President Václav Havel was the first head of state to welcome His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Thereafter, the President of America, like George Bush and others, welcomed His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the government offices. And as we speak today, in Czech Republic, 900 municipalities, town halls, libraries, and schools are hoisting Tibetan national flag. In Germany, in France, and other countries in Europe, they all hoist Tibetan national flag. But I think this year, Czech Republic has the largest number. And also, Czech Republic has the distinction of being the largest parliamentary support group in whole of Europe, with 53 members of parliament as the Tibet support group. And František is the co-chair of the Tibet support group. And I must mention the Pirate Party is the leader in that group. And also the European Parliament member of the Pirate Party is the chairperson of the European Parliamentary Support Group in Brussels. So thank you very much for coming all the way. Despite the coronavirus scare all over the world, you two are very bold to travel all the way from Europe to India to show your solidarity. This is real. Now let me read the statement of the President of the Central Tibetan Administration on the 61st anniversary of the Tibetan National Uprising Day. On 10th March 1959, people of Tibet revolted against China's illegal occupation of a sovereign Tibet. With their fists in the air, Tibetans flooded the streets of Lhasa, shouting, "Phöki Dagbo Phumi." Tibet belongs to Tibetans. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet describes 10th March 1959 as the day, I quote, "destined to be the most momentous Lhasa had ever seen," unquote. In his memoir, My Land and My People, His Holiness explains, quote, "I felt as if I was standing between two volcanoes, each likely to erupt at any moment. On the one side, there was the vehement, unequivocal, unanimous protest of my people against the Chinese regime. On the other, there was the armed might of a powerful and aggressive occupation force," unquote. The Chinese responded to the peaceful Tibetan demonstrations with brutal force. The then Indian Consul General in Lhasa reported that the Chinese People's Liberation Army unleashed its, I quote, "artillery mortars, machine guns, and all types of automatic weapons," unquote, on defenseless Tibetans. We are here together as one people on the 61st anniversary of that day to pay tribute to those brave daughters and sons of Tibet, and to draw inspirations from their sacrifices in our struggle to restore freedom and peace in Tibet. For the last 60 years, Tibetans in Tibet have been steadfast in their struggle against the illegal occupation of Tibet. What is the life today for ordinary Tibetans under Chinese rule? The recent 2020 Freedom House report, for the 5th year in a row, placed Tibet as the second least free region in the whole world, after Syria. Reporters Without Borders reported Chinese ever-tightening control over the press in its 2019 World Press Freedom Index. The 2020 Human Rights Watch report highlighted the threat to the Tibetan language as China forces politically motivated bilingual education policies in Tibet. These facts of increasing and continuing oppression of Tibetans cannot be separated from their everyday acts of resistance. Since 2009, 154 Tibetans have committed self-immolation. The latest being 25-year-old Yuntin from Ngawa Meruma Township, who passed away after self-immolating on 26 November 2019. In 2015, Tashu Wongchuk, a Tibetan language activist, said in an interview with New York Times, I quote, "So many Tibetans have self-immolated. I can understand them now because we have very few ways to solve problems," unquote. He was arrested in early 2016 and sentenced to 5 years in prison for inciting separatism. On 26 January this year, nearly 1,000 writers, linguists, translators, and language activists signed an open letter issued by the PEN America calling for his immediate release. Similarly, Sonam Palden, a 22-year-old monk from Kirti Monastery, has been in incommunicado detention since September 2019. Palden is alleged to have been critical of China's policy on Tibetan language in a WeChat post. The Human Rights Watch confirms that the Chinese language is imposed even at the kindergarten level. Since 2019, Chinese authorities in Golok have mandated Chinese language in primary and middle schools, displacing the Tibetan language as the medium of instruction. Children in Nangchen have been banned from attending Tibetan language classes in monasteries during school holidays. The authorities described the study of the Tibetan language as being illegal. This past November, 7 Tibetans were arrested for their peaceful protests in Shershul, Eastern Tibet. Following the protest, 30 monks and lay people were detained on suspicion of possessing pictures of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Order number 13, issued by the Chinese government in November 2019, aims to synthesize Tibetan Buddhism and put draconian restrictions on religious institutions. Last year, the Chinese government forcibly evicted 7,100 monks, nuns, and Buddhist practitioners from Yachengar Buddhist Institute amidst its ongoing demolition. Many of the evictees were forced into the so-called patriotic re-education camp. The Chinese Communist Party bans even retired Tibetan party cadres from taking part in Buddhist religious activities. The third session of the so-called 11th Tibetan Autonomous Regions People's Congress, held in January this year, legislated mandatory quote-unquote ethnic unity. Set to take effect from 1st of May 2020, this law will formally legalize intermarriages, subsidize subsidies for Chinese migrants, and other attempts to sinicize Tibetan identity. Sinicization is the problem, not the solution. The recent news of a secret agreement signed between Nepal and China during Chinese President Xi's visit last year, and a similar economic treaty signed between China and Myanmar, with the latter recognizing Tibet along with Xinjiang and Taiwan as inalienable parts of China, are examples of China's aggressive misuse of its economic clout to advance its political agenda. The acts of resistance by ordinary Tibetans are examples of a people who seek to protest an unjust, powerful colonial rule through the truth of their experience and their courage. The international community's recognition of the truth of our struggle is crucial. We thank our supporters for continuing to stand with the Tibetan people, and we thank international organizations for supporting the truth of our struggle by providing factual, albeit alarming reports on Tibet every year. In a momentous event on January 28 this year, the Tibetan Policy and Support Act, HR 4331, was passed with an overwhelming vote in the United States House of Representatives. I, on behalf of all Tibetans, would like to thank Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, co-sponsor Representatives James Patrick McGovern, Representative Christopher Henry Smith, and all the bipartisan members of Congress who helped and supported the passage of this act. We hope that the Senate will pass the same act, and thank co-sponsors Senator Marco Rubio and Senator Ben Cardin for their leadership. In October 2019, during his official visit to Dharamsala, Ambassador Samuel Brownback reiterated the United States support for His Holiness and the Tibetan people. Ambassador Brownback was one of the highest United States government officials to visit the CTA and Dharamsala. He called on China to immediately release the 11th Panchen Lama, who was forcefully abducted and has been missing for the last 25 years. The ambassador also endorsed the resolution on the reincarnation adopted by the 8th International Conference of Tibet Support Groups and the 3rd Special General Meeting held last year. The 14th Tibetan Religious Conference also stated that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the sole authority concerning his reincarnation. The Dutch and the Belgian governments have also stated their positions clearly. The Belgian government has said that it is the Tibetan religious community who will decide about the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama without interference from temporal authorities. During the Central Tibetan Administration-led long live prayer offered to His Holiness by the Tibetans across the globe in May 2019, His Holiness reaffirmed to live over 110 years. While no amount of votes are enough to express our immeasurable gratitude towards His Holiness, we would like to dedicate the year 2020 as the Thank You Dalai Lama year, to celebrate His Holiness's legacy and his 4 commitments. We welcome Tibetans and friends worldwide to organize activities in your capacities to create awareness about the life and work of His Holiness. We welcome the recent announcement of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet's decision to visit Xinjiang. However, we also strongly urge her to visit Tibet and press China for unfettered access in order to monitor the deteriorating human rights conditions in Tibet. Under the enlightened leadership of His Holiness and the CTA, Tibetans in South Asia are recognized as one of the world's most successful and effective refugee communities. If the Chinese government harbors any hope that the Tibet issue will gradually lose its momentum, we would like to send a clear message that we will persist. The indomitable courage of Tibetans inside Tibet will continue to inspire those of us in exile to strengthen our commitment. Peace in Tibet can only be restored through the middle way approach. Therefore, the Chinese government must resume dialogue with the envoys of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Representing the true spirit of unity of the three provinces of Tibet, Tibetans in Tibet are collectively striving to realize the aspirations of Tibetans inside Tibet. Those of us who live in freedom have the responsibility to safeguard the larger interests of our people and to lead the Tibetan cause forward. The current COVID-19 epidemic is a global public health emergency and encourage everyone to take precautionary measures. We offer our prayers in solidarity to all those countries and individuals affected by this epidemic. Inside Tibet, it is suspected that there are more than 100 coronavirus cases. However, due to the lack of freedom of speech and transparency in China, we are unable to get actual confirmation. We express our deepest sympathy to Tibetans inflicted by this outbreak and pray that the coronavirus is contained. The Kashag would like to take this opportunity to offer our deep appreciation to the great nation and people of India, the governments, the parliaments, the Tibet support groups across the world, individuals and organizations who support the just cause of Tibet and stand in solidarity with the Tibetan people in this critical time. I would like to thank the members of the European Parliament for establishing a Tibet interest group at the recently elected European Parliament. I urge all of you to be with us till the day human rights and justice prevail in Tibet. All Tibetans, wherever we may be today, understand the significance of 10th March 1959. It marks the beginning of a struggle initiated by ordinary Tibetans in Tibet. Those of us who live in exile carve their words in our hearts and commit to making the day a reality when all Tibetans will be together and free in Tibet. Finally, I offer my earnest prayers for a healthy and long life of our most revered leader, His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet. In March 1959, he was forced to flee under extremely difficult circumstances. I pray that His Holiness will soon return home. Thank you.